Okay, we're now finishing the second half of January 12, 1 year chronological reading and insights. And I'll split this up into two videos because we had, each probably 30 minutes just because it's a long narration chapters here. So now we're in chapter 34 and he's traveling back into and he's in Shechem, which I was able to get the map back up here in between this and the last video. You can kind of see if you're following the red, this is Jacob and his family, and they're now back at Shechem right here. And we find some sin happening right here. It's not good. Of course, what do you expect? Mankind's a sinner. From the line of Jacob, sin still happens. Because there's only going to be one good Savior, one final Messiah. Jacob, he is not the final Israel, but he is the father of the 12 tribes. But yet it's pointing us to someone more. But yet we see, once again, just a side note, how do you know the Bible's true? Because it's so honest in its evaluation, so honest. Let's take a look at it. Chapter 34, verse 1. Now, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. So they're in Shechem. These are pagans. These are Canaanites. She goes out. Maybe not so good of an idea. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. So this is a rape. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. No, he actually lusted after her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah. Now, always when you read this, Jacob, it seems like he should have been just a little more angry about this, but his, I mean, you can also wonder when you look at the genealogy here, and you see Jacob. Remember, Dinah comes from Leah, the wife he didn't want. He really wanted Rachel, but he came from Leah, and it's the only girl, Dinah. So it's not surprising that he kind of doesn't have, that much of a charged up response. But his sons were with the livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they had heard of it, and the men were indignant and very angry. Of course they were indignant and very angry, because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. Such things should not be done, aside from the Canaanites, just from the side that this isn't right. Then Hamor spoke with him, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. You got to be crazy to do that. He says, so Hamor says, make marriages with us. Give us your daughters to us and take your daughters for yourselves. So he basically is saying like, hey, this will be good for us. This will be positive. We'll make a peace truce between the Hivites and us, and this will be good. Let us intermarry. But God had said no to that kind of stuff. No to marrying into the daughters and doing all these marriages with the Canaanites. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it and get property in it. He's saying basically you can get property in it. Well, someday it will be theirs. And it kind of already is. It's kind of like the already not yet. It already is kind of their property. Although they only had a small bit of it. Shechem also said to his father and to her brothers. By the way, sometimes in ancient times, not only the father but the brothers had some say in marriage arrangements. Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give it. We're talking about dowry. Ask me for a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. So Shechem and his dad make a big plea, whatever you need. The sons of Jacob answered, and they had the authority to do this. The sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, because he had defiled their sister. So they said to them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, because remember, all of Israel was circumcised. That was part of the covenant. That was part of the signs of the covenant that God established with Abraham, even before Isaac was born. They said this would be disgrace. Only on this condition will we agree with you. That, by the way, they were lying. This is a lie. They never were going to hold to this. Only on this condition will we agree with you, that you will become as we are, by every male among you being circumcised. Be circumcised just like we are. And we will give our daughters to you. And we will take your daughters to ourselves. And we will dwell with you and become one people. That never would have been God's will, because he'd already told them. Jacob and, Jacob had, God had providentially made it to where Jacob got his wife not from the Canaanites, and Isaac did not get his wife from the Canaanites. So, but if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughters and we will be gone. Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the young man did not delay to do the thing. A quick peace agreement. Of course, Dinah's brothers were never intending to keep any of this, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his father's house. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city, spoke to the men of their city, saying, "These men are at peace with us. Let us dwell in the land and trade." They come to the city gates where you make decisions, where the judges make decisions. Trade in it, and behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. So everything seems to be a-okay. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us, to become one people, when every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised. So they basically tell the men of the city at the gate, hey, everybody's got to be circumcised, and they'll agree, and this will be good. Now, everybody, the Canaanites, know the history and story already of the greatness of all the lineage that comes from Abraham, but even this promise, the one true God, they would want to actually mix with them. The Hivites would. But yet that was never, God wanted a pure people, and God had a plan to bring from these people the Messiah. So mixing with the Canaanites is mixing with paganism. And you could even see here in a little bit, you'll see that the coming into the land, coming from Laban, they had already picked up some of the paganism of Laban's life. Verse 23, will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us. So you can see the monetary value that Shechem and Hamor and his son Shechem in the city of Shechem, trying to convince the Shechem judges, rulers at the gate, that this is a good thing. Let's let all the men get circumcised. We can be a part and partners, make this peace alignment. Verse 24, are all who went out of the gate of the city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised. Every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of the city. So everybody gives in, let's get circumcised. Well, there was something duplicitous going on. On the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords, came against the city while it felt secure, and they killed all the males. Now, just so you can kind of look at the genealogy line, you have Jacob and Leah, and their oldest is Reuben, and he really disqualifies himself from the birthright. And then Simeon and Levi kind of disqualify themselves, 1, 2, and 3. And which, by the way, in the providence of God, look who's next in line for the birthright, Judah. Of course, from that birthright from that tribe is where Jesus comes from, the tribe of Judah. So it's really interesting. This was sinful. This was man's sin that caused this. Simeon and Levi really forfeit some of their position you'll see at the end when Jacob is pronouncing kind of blessings at the end of Genesis. Simeon and Levi get, the birthright doesn't pass to them. Reuben doesn't get the birthright as a firstborn. And you'll see that here in the next chapter. Why? Because Reuben ends up sleeping with Bilhah, Rachel's servant, and it brings great desecration. And so then it leads you to Judah, which is just so interesting that no way is sin ever okay, but your sin does not stop the faithfulness of God, and God's plans and purposes and what He's doing still continue. And we see that you've kind of got the birthright line coming through Judah as a result. So they killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. And the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds and their donkeys and whatever was in the city and in the field. By the way, James 1:20 says, the wrath of man does not work God's righteousness. So they probably use this as justification to sin. Sometimes I think we use, so many things to justify our sin. That's what they're doing right here, almost using God as a reason. All their wealth, all their little ones, and their wives, all that was in the houses, they captured and plundered. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me stink in the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. So, Jacob says, this is bad. We are not truth tellers. We're not holding to our word. There's a lot of debate. Did Jacob even know about what was actually going on about that arrangement? It seems like his sons had really made the marriage arrangement and the circumcising. One would suspect that Jacob wouldn't be so, excited to do any kind of intermarrying. That was something strictly prohibited by God for the Israelite nation. I mean, so much so that, Isaac couldn't go to go get his bride. Abraham's servant had to go do that. And then Jacob gets sent away and comes back with, non-Canaanite, brides. But he does say this, my numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me, attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. So he kind of says, by your sin, you are putting at risk, the promises. We're small in this land, and there's a lot more of these guys than there are of us. Of course, in the end, God is always going to bring about His promises. But they said, should he treat our sister like a prostitute? Of course, from a man's perspective, we cannot blame them for the way that, as we look over here at this line, the way that Simeon and Levi, this was wrong. It was unethical to do what they did. But we do find this. Where do you think they learned such trickery? Well, they probably learned it from Jacob, right? Like father, like sons. Where did his sons learn this kind of trickery? Jacob. That's one of the things about his fathers and his parents. We have, although we don't determine everything about how our kids turn out, but we have an extreme influence. And truly, although there's no such thing as generational curses, that's another subject matter, but I can say that there are influences of parents on the lives and ethics of their kids, and we can see it right here with so much of Jacob's life revolves around this kind of lying, manipulating. You can see it. And by the way, it's not like they hadn't even seen this happen. They grew up and seeing what Laban kind of did to Jacob, so you can see some of the residue of even coming from Padan Aram. Okay, that takes us on to chapter 35. God said to Jacob, "Arise, go to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." Remember, he was at Bethel before he left. The Lord met him. Remember the ladder where the angels were ascending and descending on it. And that ladder points us to Jesus in John 1. So Jacob said to his household and all that were with him, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments." Isn't this interesting? Put away these foreign gods, purify yourself, change your garments. So it's time to get holy. You know, we're about to go meet with God. We're about to go to Bethel, the house of God. I'll show you this on a map. So you see, can you see they're leaving Shechem and going to Bethel, the house of God. He met with God there. It was a sacred place. He says, put away your foreign gods. This isn't surprising that they have foreign gods. We saw that Rachel carried away Laban's, pagan gods. And so, this is just a reminder for all of us that, all of us parents, and I mean, the culture influences our kids. What an influence, though, that Jacob's household, foreign gods are going with them. So the residue of sin is with them. But Jacob says, like, man, we got to get holy. We are about to go. We're going to Bethel. Then let us arise and go to Bethel, so that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I had gone. Now, there are some commentators would say that the reason all the problem happened at Shechem in chapter 34 is because when he arrived at Shechem, he stayed too long. He should have, arrived at Shechem, built an altar, then kept going on to Bethel, but he kind of hung too long. And that's just what some commentators would say. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they'd had and the rings that were in their ears. Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. What's the best thing to do with all the idols? Get rid of them. Yeah, get rid of them. And as they're leaving them behind in this terebinth tree at Shechem. And as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. Once again, that should have happened. They should have been pursued. They had done treacherously and wrongly. Jacob knows that they're small, but once again, God steps in. He steps in and protects his promise. Remember, this is soon key for the children of Israel to be hearing this. This shows them, even in spite of man's greatest fouling, unholy sin that they committed in chapter 34, that God is still protecting. Truly, God is Israel. Truly, they are a nation of Israel. God fights for them. And Jacob came to Luz, it is called Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan. He and all the people who were with him. And there he built an altar and called the place El Bethel, because there God revealed himself to him when he fled from his brother. El Bethel, the meeting place of God. This is the singular form of El, means God, basically a strong and mighty God. Bethel means the house of God, so a strong and mighty house of God. You'll see some churches are named El Bethel. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died. She was buried under the oak below Bethel. So he called its name Elon Bakuth. She must have really meant something to Rebekah, as her nurse, for her to be included in this narrative of the history of the people of Israel. God appeared to Jacob again and when he came from Padan Aram, and blessed him. And God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. You're no longer to be called Jacob. Your name shall be Israel." So he called his name Israel. What great reminders. What great that the Lord is confirming not only it is wrestling, but outside of that. This is another time that God is saying, this is your name. It's Israel. This name means God fights. God is fighting for his promises. Just like today, The Holy Spirit of God is fighting for us to live in light of Him, to walk in the Spirit so we don't live in the lusts of the flesh. God is fighting for us to make disciples of the nations. God is fighting for us as we are fighting to say no to sin and yes to Him and enjoy Him more. He's fighting for us to live in the roles, responsibilities that God has for our life. Verse 11, and God said to him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. Haven't you heard that before? A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you. Confirming promise, confirming promise, confirming promise. Remember, all they've really got here is basically a place to bury, Abraham's burial place, and then you find that now Jacob buys just a little bit of land, but they don't have the whole land. They don't possess the whole land. But even though they don't have it in their hand yet, it's as if they already have it, right? So even though they don't have it, they have it. I'm just going to write that on there. It's like they don't have it, but they have it. They don't have tangibly in their hand all the promises that God gave through Abraham, but they have it. They don't have all the land, but they have it. They don't have many nations, but they have it. Just like us, all the precious promises that God has given to us, we don't have it. We don't have that dwelling place in glory with Him. We don't have the curse of sin not touching us anymore. We don't have it. We don't have that glorified body, but although we don't have it, we actually already have it. It is sure and settled. We live by faith and not just by sight. So this is what's happening. He's telling them, he's reiterating to them. Lord is so good. And God went up from him in the place where it spoke with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where it spoke with him, a pillar of stone. He poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it. So Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. Then they journeyed from Bethel when they were still some distance from Ephrath. Rachel went into labor, and she had hard labor. And when her labor was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, do not fear, for you have another son. And as her soul was departing, for she was dying, she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. Here's the last of the last of the 12 sons is in the promised land, Benjamin. So Rachel has 2 children, but she has this last one. She dies. And it says, so Rachel died and she was buried on the way in Ephrath, that is in Bethlehem. This is, another, it's that burial place that God has. And Jacob set up a pillar over her tomb, in the pillar of Rachel's tomb, which is there to this day. So she's buried. She's buried in the promised land of Canaan. But she dies. Rachel's off the scene now from Jacob. And, one wonders, of course, Rachel's not there to love on her sons, but it seems like Jacob, poured himself and loved himself on Joseph. And Israel journeyed on and pitched their tent toward the tower of Eder. While Israel lived in that land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard of it. So another, more sin that you see. You just can't escape. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, they're at Bethel, and you've got Simeon and Levi have already forfeited by what they did in the previous chapter. And now we have Reuben here forfeiting himself. Man's sin, though, can't thwart God's promises. And God had this thing planned from the front to the back. Just because God had this plan, it doesn't empty man of his responsibility. Simeon, Levi, and Reuben are held accountable. If you look from Jacob to Leah, it was 1, 2, 3 sons. But now Judah becomes, in the end, Judah is the birthright son. It's the one that the promise is going to come through. But over here, just to kind of show you on the map here, so we have, though, Reuben, the first of Leah, is actually over here, sleeping with Bilhah, Rachel's servant. So not a good thing to do. Verse 23, the sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun. So he gives the genealogies as he finishes off this chapter. We're going through the genealogies of basically Isaac, and because then in chapter 36 we're going to jump into the genealogies of Jacob to Isaac, because in chapter 36 we're going to go with Esau's genealogy for tomorrow. And the sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. Sons of Bilhah, Rachel's servant, Dan and Naphtali. Okay. Say it that way too. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's servant, Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. And Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre. Let me give you an idea of where that's at. You see that kind of on the map? I'm sorry, I probably didn't do that very long. You see this on the map? Kind of trace the red arrows from Shechem, Bethlehem to Mamre. Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre. That is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. I love that although this is the promised land, they're in it, they still consider themselves sojourners. That's what we are. We are just sojourning where we are right now. We have an ultimate city that we're looking for, whose builder and maker is God. Abraham in Hebrews 11 was looking for a city whose builder and maker was God. He lived appropriately in the land of Canaan where the Lord wanted him, but ultimately Canaan wasn't the final resting place. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac breathed his last breath and was gathered to his people, old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. It's interesting, Esau and Jacob had already reconciled with each other, but what a great grace when all the kids can make sure they're over themselves and they can bury the parents together. In my years of pastoral ministry, I've seen this sometimes not go very well. Children full of pride, full of all sorts of family rivalry, and there's a lack of gospel there. So if you're listening to this and there's family issues, you need to get that solved. You need to repent. You need to forgive, so that when the days come to bury loved ones, they can be done together. There's no need for that happening if the gospel's there. So Esau and Jacob bury their father together, and he's there at Abraham's. At the cave that Abraham had bought. And I just think that's interesting. Really, when you kind of get down to it, they just kind of have a place to bury. They have the land is theirs. The promise is good as theirs, but they actually don't have the title deed. They just have the promise of the title deed. And all they have in the promised land, these patriarchs here, is death. That's basically what they got in their hands, is death. What a great parallel with us, that basically when this life is over, the only kind of real estate we really have is just where we died, a burial plot. That's all we have, which just tells us, where do we put the hope of our life and the emphasis of our life? See, we are getting ready to die, and the key thing for our life is preparing for eternity. Now, that doesn't mean live appropriately where we're at, because they did. It means that we're making disciples that can make disciples, so that we can bring as many into the kingdom with us, that we can train more that can go out and bring people into the kingdom, because we don't have anything else. We are sojourners here, looking for a city whose builder and maker is God. Okay, that's January the 12th. We were January the 12th. That's Genesis chapter 32 through 35, and we'll see you on January the 13th.